Yo, I have a 2012 Honda Fit in here. It's kind of a rarity for the lazy people of America because it has a manual transmission. So this guy, he bought this brand new and he had to special order it from Japan. So this was actually manufactured in Japan, where most Hondas in America are usually assembled in Canada or something. So there probably isn't going to be a whole lot of people from North America that are going to need this video. A Honda Jazz is the same thing. So I'm sure most of the people that would actually watch this just to fix the car are going to be from Japania or Europia or Africa or maybe even some Indias. He burnt up his clutch on the thing. So he got an Excetti clutch kit with a flywheel because he's not stupid. Somebody talked him into a slave cylinder, so I'll be putting that in. I have a 19mm tire. This rusty crusty is looking like an 1.25" or a metric something something. And it's definitely rusty crusty. Gonna try to get this up to about 500 degrees with some MAP gas. See if that does anything. Looks like I'm gonna have to put this back on the ground and bust that nut off manually. Okay, I have the thing on the ground, in gear, first gear with the emergency brake on. Hopefully it won't roll on me. Got a long jack pole here. Ew, what's that? Ah, I broke my breaker bar. Craftsman. Do the same to the other side. Well, I got a little deep creep here. I just want to make sure that these splines move, and they do. This other side's not that nice. Must have had this axle replaced once upon a time. Yeah, that one's a little tight. Get a little air hammer action on the thing. Okay, that's absolutely ridiculously tight. When in doubt, use a bigger air hammer. Ooh, that moved. Okay. Now I have a big piece of plastic here I need to remove. It's got a bunch of plastic clippy things. I want to take the centers out. Try not to break these. They're kind of brittle. Looks like I got some Phillips screws on the thing here and there too. Looks like there was a big plastic cover in the center. I'm sure a snowstorm ripped that thing off. I'm going to remove this lower ball joint next. I could take these two bolts off of the strut, but if I do that, I take a chance of throwing off the alignment when I go bolting these back up, because it might throw the camber off a little bit. Get in here with a hook tool and pop that out. Clippy thing looks like that. These are a 19mm. Give myself some swinging room here. A lot of times you can whack this with a hammer real good and it'll knock this ball joint loose. That way I don't have to put a pickle fork on here, because if I do, I can wreck this boot. I got this fancy little pry bar hook thingamajigger. I can stick a pry bar in here like this and pull down on this, and it's not loose yet. There, I got it that time. Now I can try to pull this axle through. Should be nice and loose. There it goes. Get that out of the way. Do the same to the other side. I have a drain pan just in case this transmission's overfilled a little bit. I should be able to just get a pry bar under here and just give it a pop. There's a little clip that kind of holds them in. And then it should just fall right out. Now that I got my drain pan out, I got a 3/8 square right here. I'm gonna drain out this oil in the transmission. Oh, that looks nice and clean. They say you're always supposed to use a new gasket for these too, this aluminum crush washer, but I never do. It'll be fine. Torque to 29 foot-pounds. Now before I get the axle off on this other side, I'm gonna take off this dog bone because it'll just make my life a little easier. It's gotta come off anyways. Got a 19 millimeter here. 17 millimeter here. That's supposed to loosen this up enough to get this bolt out of here. I can get this bracket off of here. 17 millimeters on these as well. There's 3 of these. Now I can get in here with a pry bar and give this one a pop. Now I suppose I can get at some of these bell housing bolts and stuff. There's a 17 millimeter hiding here. I could take this heat shield off, but I'm going to try to get around that. That one's out. It's going to stay stuck in the hole though. A couple more 17 millimeters here. Feels like this one's galling up. It's got a through hole in it. I'm going to put a little penetrant in it. Looks like I got 3 10 millimeters for this dust cover. Now there's an exciting 17 millimeter bolt way up behind this converter I can get at with a 3-foot extension and a 17 millimeter swivel socket. If you can see that. Get a little magnet action up there. Get that bolt out. Now on the other side of this transmission, I got another one of them clippy things, just like on the lower ball joints. For the shift cable. Get that off. I have 2 14 millimeters for some amazing bracketry right here. I'm just going to leave this flop around right here for now. It's actually bolted onto an air cleaner box. I have a 17 millimeter here. This is actually longer than most of the bell housing bolts because this is going into the starter. There's also a 14 millimeter on the bottom of this motor mount. Now I got a battery to deal with. These hold down rods look really rusted out, so I'm gonna put a little penetrant on those. 10 millimeters. Wow, the dealer did that. Always take off the negative first. I'm thinking that'll work again. Maybe. These are just held in by little hooky things, so I just unhook the hooky thing and out they go. Bye-bye battery. There's a little tab on this you pull back on. And then you should be able to give that a wiggle and pull that out. There's little squeezy, clippy things in here. squeeze those and unclip those. There's another one up here for the mass airflow sensor. I kind of want to take this battery tray out, that's why I did that, but I might not have to. These wires are going to be out of my way enough, I think. Unclip those, take that out. There's a hose clamp on this throttle body with a 5.5 millimeter on it. I want to loosen that up. Got a little baby needle nose vice grip for this pinch clamp here. I'm just going to leave that on like that. I have a 10 millimeter here. That's that amazing bracket that I took them 14 millimeters off of. Another 10 millimeter here. And if I'm not wrong, I should be able to just yank this whole system right off of here. Now I have a little vent tube here. It's basically just a vacuum hose. I can take this off, kind of flop that out of the way. That's going to come out with the transmission. I can unplug this sensor. This is probably for reverse light. 212 millimeters on this bracket. 212 millimeters on this slave cylinder. This whole system can kind of get out of my way. I got another little pinchy clippy thing for this wire I'm going to take off. That way I can just kind of flop this all out of the way. Got another clip for this other shift cable. There it goes. I forgot to unplug the wheel speed sensor. Pushing that little tab. Now there's a bracket holding these two clutch cables on. There's 3 12 millimeter bolts for this. Now I can just pick this up and flop that out of the way. I'm actually going to throw a little bungee cord on here. The engine needs to be supported somehow because there's only the front motor mount that's going to be holding the thing in, so it's going to fall out like that. And so I have it supported, and I'm using a transmission jack and some amazing apparatus I just kind of rigged up on it. And I strapped it down to make sure it doesn't fall off. A lot of people might just use a floor jack underneath the oil pan. You should always use a block of wood and then just get a couple of friends to help you, because this transmission's really only about 60 pounds, but I don't have any friends, so I got to do it myself. I have two 14 millimeters on the frame for this mount. I have 3 17 millimeter nuts. There's also a little baby 10 millimeter ground on the back of this thing I forgot about. This ground right here. With any luck, this should just all come out of here in one piece, one big chunk. Now I should have every bolt out of this except for this one 17 millimeter holding the engine into the transmission. That should be my last bolt. There's not too many pry points on this transmission. I can see it's just a hairline crack, so it's starting to separate. There's a little spot right here I can stick a screwdriver in that I've been kind of working on a little bit. Just kind of jiggling it just a little bit here. Yeah, it's separated a little more. I just got to go around the transmission. The two alignment pins in the transmission are making it stick really good, so I'm just going to find some spots to pry it apart until it pops out. These pressure plate bolts are all 12.10 millimeter. Yep, that clutch is gone. It's down to the rivets. Now anytime you do a clutch on one of these, you should always replace the flywheel or get it resurfaced. You never want to reuse this surface. These crankshaft bolts are all 12.10 17 millimeters. I'm just gonna wash all this off with some Dawn and water and a pressure bottle. Now I need to try and get this pilot bearing out. It's actually really crunchy. Doesn't feel right at all. So I'm gonna try using a little bread. Sourdough. Yummy. I'm gonna stuff this in the hole. Pack it in there really good. I got the pilot bearing here. I'm just gonna put it in here and tap the thing with a hammer, and hopefully it'll push this out. More bread. I took the little ball off the end too so I can hammer on it a little easier. And there it is. Remove bread. Now I just found a socket. In my case, it's a 3/16 Craftsman. And it's the same size as the outside diameter of this bearing. It's actually a hair smaller. You don't want to pound on the inside or the seal. I'm just going to try to seat this a little bit. I'm going to drive it home. Got a little brake cleaner. I'm going to try to clean this surface up just a little bit now. I'm going to replace this rear main seal. I often find the best way to do this most of the time is to just use a 1/4" self-drilling screw. I don't want to touch the crankshaft surface or the surface on the block. So I need to be kind of careful. It just tried to walk out on me there. I guess I'll try to punch a little pilot hole in it first. That should help, I hope. Now that I got that in there, I can just use a claw hammer and try to pop this seal out. Sometimes it takes a couple tries. I got it out. Little brake cleaner on a rag again. I got a new rear main seal. That's the Felpro part number. I put about a 50 weight oil on the seal, just a little bit. Slide that thing on there like so. Just like the bearing, I only want to pound on the very outside of the seal. I got a PCV pipe here that seems to be about the right size for this. That seems to be in there really nice. Oh, I just want to double check this mating surface, make sure there's no junk on it. It's nice and clean. I got a nice clean new flywheel here. Some people put blue Loctite on these bolts. I don't feel the need. The factory doesn't do it. I'm going to hold the flywheel with just a pry bar here. I'm going to kind of go in a crisscross pattern, just like a tire. Just snug these down a little. Then I'm going to torque them to 50 foot-pounds. And then I'll do a final torque at 87 foot-pounds. Now before I get too carried away and just toss this in the engine, I like to make sure that these splines line up really nice. And they give you this clutch junk. And I want to just put a little bit on the splines. I don't want to get too carried away, because you don't want this stuff flying all over inside of your flywheel. Just put a little bit on there like that. And get a little bit on the clutch disc. That's good enough. That's all the lube you need on there. Now I have this throwout bearing to deal with. And then this fork usually pops straight back like that. I can take it out, get some brake cleaner after this ball. And I can do the same thing with this throwout bearing shaft. I can get in here too with this little ball socket. Clean these fork sides. That's the ball where the slave cylinder goes. I have some Honda urea grease here. Some nice green junk. I want to put a little bit on this shaft for the throwout bearing. Then this little ball, there's a dent in here, a little detent. I want to fill that up with urea grease. And this little ball right here for the slave cylinder, I'll put a little extra in here. And I'm going to put some on this wear surface right here for the throwout bearing on the forks. Then I can snap this back in here. It just pushes straight in. I have a new throwout bearing here. And if you can see in here, there's a little groove inside of here. See that little groove in there? I want to fill that groove up with urea grease. And that should last the life of the life. Stick this in here so it works on the push and the pull. I got a little excess here I'm going to wipe off. Make sure my dust boot's in there right. And that should be all I need to do with that. Now I made sure there wasn't any grease or oil or anything on this machine surface here. Same with my pressure plate, that's all nice and clean. This clutch disc only goes on one way, obviously. So you can't screw that up. I can use my pilot tool. Line up some pins. I'm going to want to try to line this clutch disc up as best as I can. Usually I stick my fingers under here and I can feel the disc and just make sure that it's equal all the way around, but there's not a lot of room in here, so I can't do that. Make sure this tool slides in and doesn't bind up at all, I guess. That's got a little play in it all the way around. It kind of feels right. I'm going to call that a good guess and just work my way around and just snug all these down little by little. Okay, all of those are snug. That kind of feels like crap, so I'm going to loosen it all back up again. Try this again. Well, that's nice and loose. It feels good again. I got it all snug down and this thing falls right in and it doesn't feel like it's binding up at all, and it's loose all the way around. I want to final torque all of these to 18 foot-pounds. Okay, I got this silly thing on my transmission jack and I got it up there. Now I just got to line everything up. You don't want to hang this transmission on the clutch disc and you don't want to force it in because you could take the chance of warping or wrecking your clutch disc. So I just got to line this up as best as I can and just get it to kind of fall in for me. Sometimes it takes a while and sometimes you get lucky and they just fall right in. I have a really long bolt from a D16 here that I'm going to use as a starter, just so I can try to line this up a little better. See, the thing won't even thread in, so I'm still kind of off. I got that long bolt started, so I'm kind of close. Well, I tried for about a half an hour to get the thing lined up and it wouldn't go in. So I dropped the transmission and I just looked at everything to try to see if there was something going on that was wrong. And I stuck my finger in here in the new clutch, and it was all rough. There was a lot of burrs in it and stuff, so I got a couple of jeweler's files. One of them's flat and the other one's round. And I just went in here and I just took a jeweler's file and I just went around and knocked off all the burrs like that. And then I took a round file and then I just went all the way around the outside like that. I tried to put the transmission back in. I didn't even need to put any bolts on the thing, and it fell right in like a big dumb piece of magic. I can try to sneak this mount back in here now. Lifted up the car a little bit to get this thing started. Try to get a little alignment punch in after this. These nuts get torqued to 54 foot-pounds, and these three bolts get torqued to 43 foot-pounds. And then all the bell housing bolts I'm going to tighten to 47 foot-pounds. These 6x1 millimeters on here, they all get torqued to 7 foot-pounds. And there's a ground on the mount. That's a 6 millimeter by 1 too, so that one gets torqued to 7 foot-pounds as well. Now I have this dog bone to contend with. These three get torqued to 61 foot-pounds. Then I got the dog bone. It says up, upside up. There's a little, this notch goes straight back. This nut gets torqued to 69 foot-pounds. Then I gotta pull the motor a little bit to line this up. And this one gets torqued to 61 foot-pounds. Now all of these 8x125 millimeter bolts with a 12 millimeter head, they all get torqued to 16 foot-pounds. I got 2 here and 2 here, and the 3 on the shifter cable. I'm gonna do all of that and get back to you. Put in this new slave cylinder. I'm bleeding it out right now. That's some amazing looking sludge. People never change out the fluid on these. I always do on mine. Just gravity bleeding it. I have everything topside all buttoned up. Now I get to deal with the axles. I just want to run my finger around the inside of this seal, and I want to make sure there's no grit or grime. I'm going to reuse these old seals, so I'm just going to make sure they're clean. I got some 50 weight oil here in a squirt can. You could use grease. Put a little oil on the inside of the seal. Make sure the sealing surface on the axle is nice and clean. Stick it in the hole. This thing's not being nice to me, so I'm going to ratchet this out of my way. Try to get this thing to go in. There it goes. Popped right in. Make sure that lines up in the spline. Line up the lower ball joint. This lower ball joint nut's supposed to get torqued to 55 foot-pounds. Put my pin back in. This axle nut gets torqued to 134 foot-pounds. I can tell it's right where it was. Get a ball peen hammer and bash that in a little bit. Do the same to the other side. Now that I have both of these axles in, I can take the fill plug out. I have 2 quarts of manual transmission fluid. I'm probably going to need a little over 1.5 quarts. I'm going to use a hand pump like this one, and I'm going to try not to make a mess. I got a drain pan under it because I just want to keep pumping fluid into it until it starts drooling out the hole. Okay, it's pouring out of there. Now I'm just going to let it pour out until it turns into a drip and put the plug back in. Now I'll torque this to about 40 foot-pounds. Well, I got the tires on, torqued those down to 80 foot-pounds. Got all that stuff put back together. There's only one thing left to do. Drive it. Okay, bye.